Hello learners, welcome to NIO Studio. Today we are going to study chapters 5 of Psychology secondary course, that is 222, and the name of this chapter is Sensory Processes, which is attention and perception. So in this lesson we are going to study about another basic psychological process which is perception. So before going on further, I am Alankriti Sharma. I am Academic Officer Psychology at NIUS. So let us understand what are the objectives for today's class. So objectives, after watching this video, you will be able to firstly understand various senses and the sense organs, know the qualities that are common to all senses, understand the factors in attention, and identify some other senses beyond these 5 senses. So the topics which we will be covering for today's lesson primarily are divided into 3 parts. So to understand this chapter better, you have to understand that when we talk about perception, the first step to perception is sensation. Then perception happens, and an important part of how perception is happening is attention. So these are the 3 key areas which we will be touching upon in today's class, and we will be studying about how you perceive this particular world. So there are various environmental stimuli which you might encounter in your surroundings, but how these environmental stimuli are getting transformed into a perception for you. So what are the rules that are involved in this process? We are going to understand this in this lecture, and you will understand how this very physical interaction with the environment is qualitatively getting transformed. So how you are able to see the surroundings and why certain things appear the way they are. So let us basically introduce you to senses. So you are aware that we have 5 sense organs, and today's lecture will be about understanding how these sense organs, they collect information and how they are processed by our brain. So there are 5 sense organs primarily. First is eye, then we have ear, then we have skin and nose, and then we have tongue. So these are the 5 main sense organs through which we collect information from our surroundings. Apart from these 5 sense organs, there are 2 more which we call as vestibular and kinesthetic. These are the 2 other additional sense organs which we use to collect information from our surroundings. So these are the 5 basic, and these are the 2 additional ones which you might have not studied before. So there are 2 primary functions of sense organ. First one is the survival, and the second one is sensuality, which is basically it gives pleasure. So how these sense organs are acting as these 2, as it is giving you these 2 functions. So firstly, when we talk of survival, so whatever environmental stimuli you are encountering in your environment, to understand them and how these can help you to survive. So if you encounter a snake in your surroundings, so that if you have to register that snake, first of all you have to see through your eyes, and then you will register that this is a dangerous stimuli in the environment and you have to save yourself from it. So this can be one of the function. So by survival we mean these kind of functions that sense organs complete. Then when we talk of sensuality, it basically means that these sense organs are also helpful in gaining pleasure. For example, when you cook something nice and the smell of that particular food, it goes in your nose, and then you feel hungry. So these it is one of the function, like it is helping you to feel better. So pleasure is one of the function of sense organ. Then our senses do more than just making contact with our external world. They also add happiness and variety of variety and satisfaction in our life. So sense organ helps you to feel a number of experiences in the world. So you can experience the world through your sense organs. So these are the primary aims or the functions of sense organs. Now we talk of the process of sensation. So as I told you earlier, that sensation is the base of perception. So before perception, sensation occurs. So what do we mean by the process of sensation? So sensation, it is a process by which neural impulses are created by stimulation of sensory neurons that results in the awareness of conditions inside or outside the body. So when we are talking of sensation, we primarily say that whatever information is there in our environment, it is getting transmitted to our brain by neural impulses. In subsequent chapters or in the previous chapters also, you have learned about how neurons are taking information and they are transmitting it to another neurons, and how these sensation is getting transmitted to our brain, and our brain is sending signal to our rest of the body in order to react. So this is the process of sensation. But one step forward is perception. So what does perception mean? Perception basically refers to elaboration and interpretation of these sensory experiences, and these are primarily governed with our past and present experiences. So if you see an object, so this information will be sent to your brain, and this sensory information is getting transmitted to your brain via neural impulses. So this process we will call as sensation. So you are registering that stimuli, and then that stimuli is getting transmitted in the form of neural impulses in your brain, and then your brain will be sending some signal. But before that, perception is also occurring. So perception is occurring hereby you are understanding what this particular object is, whether if it is a round object, what is it, whether it is hard or it is soft, or from your previous experiences you will get to know more about that object. So getting more information, and you are elaborating and basically interpreting what that sensory experience means to you, and this is primarily happening with your past and present experiences. So what has from the past, you will process whether this object is a ball or whether it is an orange or any other object. So this is how perception is happening. So let's elaborate furthermore on sensation. So sensation, as I told you, it is the process by which one form of energy is converted into another form. So you can see a torch, and you can see the what is happening in the brain. So the light is getting transmitted into the light is a physical stimuli which you see, and this physical stimuli is getting converted into another form of energy, which is chemical energy and electrical energy, and these neurons are transmitting this information from one neuron to another. So basically in sensation, one form of energy is converted into another form of energy. So let's understand an important concept which is related to sensation. So this is the concept of threshold. Threshold basically are of two types. One is the difference threshold, and the second one is the absolute threshold. So when we talk of difference threshold, it means that this is the minimal amount of change that is required between two stimuli to be recognized by an individual, and it is known as difference threshold. Whereas the minimum amount of physical energy that is needed to produce a sensory experience, it is called as absolute threshold. So what do we mean by these two terms and how these two are different? So let us consider an example. So you can see a glass of water, and I have added 1 spoon of sugar to it. So from the previous slide, can you tell me what will be the absolute threshold here and what will be the difference threshold here? So absolute threshold will be the minimum amount of sugar that I require in order to make that water sweet. So if I add two drops of sugar to it, if you feel that this water has become sugary, then you will say that this is the absolute threshold. But suppose if I don't feel it that the water has turned sweet, so I'll add 1 spoon of sugar, and then you feel that the water has turned sweet. So we will say that absolute threshold of this glass of water is 1 spoon of sugar. Then what is difference threshold? So it is basically the minimum amount of energy or the minimum amount of stimuli that we need to add in order to make it more sweeter. So if I add 1 spoon of sugar and then I add 2 drops of sugar again, if you are able to detect that there is a difference from the first glass to the second glass, so if you are able to detect that I have added some more sugar to it, then we will say that this is the difference threshold. So it is also the minimum energy that is required in order to make you feel the difference, that there is a difference in the previous stimuli and the new stimuli. So these are the 2 important concepts of threshold which we basically try to understand in sensation. So what is the need of understanding about these thresholds? So it is basically to make you understand that if you there are many things which are in your surrounding, but you might not be registering it because it might be of a low threshold, that it is not coming into your awareness because it hasn't reached to that level. So above that level, above that threshold level, you might be able to register such stimuli. So sensation is deeply connected with the concept of threshold, and how you can reach that particular level of sensation or threshold in order to basically make it register to your sense organs. So these are the fundamental sense organs. I have taken this table from your book only, and it is basically a summarization of how sense organs are reacting to stimulus and what are their functions basically. So sight is responding to the stimulus of light waves, and eyes are basically the sense organs, and sensation is basically, it might be with respect to color, it might be with respect to patterns or textures. So all these things will be considered in sensation. You will be noticing all these things when you are perceiving in the environment. You will be perceiving, you will be sensing the colors, the patterns, the textures. All these things will be sensed when you are using your eyes, or when you are basically seeing something. Then we have hearing. Hearing, basically the stimulus remains the sound waves and the sense organ is ear. And what are the sensations? So sensations are basically noise, tone, music, it might be pitch also. So these will be the sensation for in case when we are talking of hearing. Then we have skin sensation. It is basically related to external touch, and skin is the sense organ, and the sensations are touch, cold, warmth, pain. So these will be the sensation when we talk of the skin as a sense organ. Then we have smell. It is basically related to volatile material, and the sense organ is nose, and the sensation are basically odors. Next we talk of taste, and taste is basically related with tongue, and there are sensations of sweet, salty, bitter. So these are the sensations which we talk when we talk of tongue. Next we come on to perception. So sensation, we have talked that it is the stage where neural activity codes the information about the nature of the stimulation. But when we talk of perception, it is basically a step forward to sensation. So, perception is the next stage in which an internal representation of an object is formed, and this representation provides a working description of perceiver's external environment. So, we have talked briefly about perception also in the previous slide. So, elaborating on that, it is basically you are making an internal understanding of whatever you are seeing outside. So, some interpretation is happening in your brain, and then it is providing you with the appropriate or the best perception according to your external environment as well as your experiences. So, in sensation, you saw that the role of physical environment is more. Whatever the information or the stimuli that are around you, they are entering into your consciousness, you are attending to it, and then you are taking the stimuli, and neural activity is happening in your brain. But in perception, whatever that neural activity has happened, you tend to give a meaning to it. So, you make an interpretation of those sensations, and then perception happens. Now, we will look into how this perception is happening. So, perception basically involves synthesis of sensory features into percept of an object that can be recognized. This helps in identification and recognition, and meaning is assigned to the percepts. Perception and recognition are combined processes that do not act separately. So, what is happening is these are the three objects which have a similar shape, but they are different in the colors. So, when you see this these physical objects and this information is going into your brain, you are processing it and you are coming out with a perception that the first one is a football. And you are very specific that it is a football, although the third option is also a ball, but it is a different type of ball. So, this interpretation which is happening is basically, firstly it is happening on the basis of your previous experiences, because you might have seen these three objects in your environment and you might have seen people using them differently. So, this is one thing, and then you are also using information, different information, like in the first object, why did you say it as a football and not any other object or not any other ball? It is because it has a pattern to it. So, you are processing information, different types of information. For example, what is the size of the object, what is the color of the object, what are the patterns that we can see on the object. So, different, you are taking all these information and then combining, and then you are coming to a conclusion that what this object could be. And apart from all these information, another thing which is also contributing to your perception is your previous knowledge, your experiences. So, these are all these things which contribute to the process of perception. Now, let us talk of the stages of perception. So, when we talk of stages of perception, it is basically you are differentiating between the proximal stimulus and the distal stimulus. So, proximal basically comes from the word proximity. So, whatever it is near to you, it is a proximal stimulus, and whatever is distant from you, like it is at a distance from you, it is the distal stimulus. So, the aim of perception basically remains that you have to get information about the distal stimulus by processing information about the proximal stimulus. So, you might be sitting in a room or anywhere, so you just look around in your surrounding, and you might you might understand that some objects are near to you, like you might be sitting on a table, or you might be sitting on a bed. So, these objects these are closer to you. We will say that these are the proximal stimulus. Some things might be at a distance from you. These we will call as distal stimulus. So, how we are using the information from the proximal stimulus, and then how we are making out information about the distal stimulus. So if you see at night the moon, it is a distal stimulus because it is not near to you. But how you are perceiving that moon in your surrounding with the help of trees, or the cable, overhead cables. So you are using all these proximal stimulus in order to understand how far is the moon, what information can I derive from the from these clues, from these stimuluses which are near to me. So there are multiple cues also which you will study more about in your senior secondary course, but you might be aware of certain cues which help you in making out information about distance, depth. So in order to understand the world in a 3D perspective, these cues or these stimulus, they help in the process of perception. So basically it is more to there is more to perceiving, which includes physical properties such as shape or size and past experiences. So let us see the process of perception, how perception is happening. So this is a flow chart, and this is showing you how you are coming on to a particular perception. So let us begin from the bottom. So you might see environmental stimulus, and then you are sensing it, then sensory processes are happening, then sensations are happening. So we have understood till the point of sensation. Then we say that organization, these we will be covering in the coming slides. So these two steps, that is perceptual synthesis and organization, these are the two steps which we will be covering in the coming slides. So these two steps happen, then we analyze into parts, and then we are coming on to a conclusion with the help of our expectations, our knowledge and our beliefs. So you might see that all the other psychological processes, like your past experiences, like your knowledge about the situation, like your beliefs, all these are impacting your process of perception, and these are very significant. They play a significant role when you experience illusions. So a very key role is played by various factors like beliefs, like knowledge, when you are experiencing certain illusions. So let us talk about perceptual organization. Perception is basically an organized process, and the most common form of perceptual organization is figure ground organization. So sensations are basically grouped into objects or figures that stand on a planar background. So the basic thing which we perceive first is what is the figure and what is the background. So whenever you are seeing anything in your environment, you try to understand and make out what is the figure and what is the ground. So what is the ground basically? So this is the first step of perceptual organization. In this video also, you might see there are things which are in the background and I am sitting at the forefront. So this is the primary demarcation which we make when we are trying to organize things in our environment. So this is a picture. These are the two basically reversible figure and ground organization. So in the two figure, you can see any of it. The first one is showing you there are two you can see two people, or you can see a vase. Similarly in the second one also, either you can see two people or you can see an inverted vase. So these are basically showing you that how you make a clear demarcation between what is the figure and what is the background. Here because it is a black and white figure, so you might see both both the things in a reversible fashion. So sometimes you might see two people in the forefront and the white part you might see in the background. If you see the black part to be the background, then you see a vase. So this is an example of how perception is happening in terms of figure and ground. What is the figure and what is the background? Next we talk of what are the laws of perceptual grouping. So these are very important laws and these are very fascinating in order to understand how our perception is happening. So the first one is proximity. Proximity is basically when the stimuli that are near to one another, they tend to be grouped together. Events that are close in time and space, they are also perceived together. So it is very simple. It means that if two things are happening together or they are happening one after another or they are happening in proximity, then we believe that these two things belong together. For example, this is the picture. You might see that there are two rows. Basically you are not seeing multiple dots, but you are seeing two rows. So because the dots are arranged in proximity, so we can understand here that perception is happening in terms of proximity. So the dots which are closer together, we are perceiving them to be belonging to the single row, whereas the other dots we are believing that because they are near to each other, these are forming another row. So we will wait for a short break, then we will begin again.
ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम में हमें NIOS के थ्रू ये सिखाया जाता है, बताया जाता है कि आपको कौन सी प्रॉब्लम में पेशेंट को कैसे स्टेबलाइज करना है।
हेल्थ वर्कर का कोर्स करने के बाद में व्यक्ति इतना निपुण अवश्य हो जाता है कि किसी मरते हुए व्यक्ति की, चाहे वो जलने से हो, चाहे वो डूबने से हो, चाहे वो करंट लगने से हो, चाहे वो सड़क का एक्सीडेंट हो, चाहे वो हार्ट अटैक हो, चाहे दौरा पड़ने से हो, उसकी जान बचा सके। और जान बचाने के बाद में उसको प्राथमिक उपचार देने के उपरांत इमरजेंसी तक पहुंचा सके, जहाँ पे कि डॉक्टर की देखरेख में उसका आगे का इलाज संभव हो सके।
सामुदायिक स्वास्थ्य प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम NIOS का बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम है। इस कार्यक्रम में आधारभूत जीव विज्ञान, मातृत्व एवं बाल स्वास्थ्य देखभाल, रोगों व आपातकालीन स्थितियों में निवारण एवं प्रबंधन, ये 3 महत्वपूर्ण विषय हैं जिनके आधार पर एक स्वास्थ्य कार्यकर्ता बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से किसी भी इमरजेंसी को हैंडल करने में सक्षम होता है और किसी भी इमरजेंसी में वो फर्स्ट एड दे करके उसको डॉक्टर के पास रेफर कर सकता है। आइए हम सब मिलकर के इस स्वास्थ्य कार्यक्रम को सफल बनाएं। जय हिंद, जय भारत। जय हो।
ब्यूटी यानी सौंदर्य एक आकर्षक विषय होने के साथ साथ एक लोकप्रिय व्यवसाय भी है। भारत में सौंदर्य उद्योग विकसित देशों की तुलना में दोगुनी तेजी से बढ़ रहा है। इसी तेजी से प्रशिक्षित कुशल कर्मियों की मांग भी बढ़ रही है, जो उच्च क्वालिटी की सौंदर्य सेवाएं प्रदान कर सकें। सौंदर्य क्षेत्र में रोजगार के बढ़ते अवसरों को देखते हुए NIOS विभिन्न 6 माही पाठ्यक्रम उपलब्ध कराता है। इनमें ब्यूटी कल्चर एवं बालों की देखरेख, सौंदर्य उपचार, हाथों व पैरों की देखभाल, बालों की देखभाल व स्टाइलिंग, ये सभी एकल पाठ्यक्रम के अलावा व्यवसायिक स्ट्रीम में भी उपलब्ध हैं, जिसमें शिक्षार्थी 3 सौंदर्य संबंधित विषय, एक शैक्षिक विषय और एक भाषा विषय उत्तीर्ण कर 10वीं का प्रमाण पत्र प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। NIOS से ये कोर्स करने के बाद आप पार्लर में एक सौंदर्य सहायक के तौर पर कार्य कर सकते हैं। नेल आर्ट जैसी विशिष्ट सेवाओं के लिए आप अलग से सैलून भी स्थापित कर सकते हैं। सहायक हेयर स्टाइलिस्ट या मेकअप आर्टिस्ट भी बन सकते हैं। मोबाइल पार्लर्स के माध्यम से फोन पर अपॉइंटमेंट लेकर क्लाइंट के घर पर भी अपनी सेवाएं दे सकते हैं। हमारे इन पाठ्यक्रमों से अनेक शिक्षार्थी लाभान्वित हो रहे हैं और व्यवसाय कर आर्थिक रूप से स्वतंत्र बन रहे हैं।
मैंने NIOS से ब्यूटी कल्चर का वोकेशनल कोर्स किया था। मैंने अपना एक खुद का पार्लर चलाया है और मेरे 2 छोटे छोटे बच्चे हैं। मैं अब अपने अंदर कॉन्फिडेंस रखती हूँ कि मैं उनके लिए भी कुछ कर सकती हूँ, उन्हें अच्छी एजुकेशन दे सकती हूँ।
इन सभी पाठ्यक्रमों में प्रवेश लेने हेतु आप हमारी वेबसाइट www.nios.ac.in पर लॉगिन करें। सभी प्रवेश केवल ऑनलाइन ही किए जाते हैं और जो संस्थान NIOS की मान्यता प्राप्त कर इन पाठ्यक्रमों का संचालन करना चाहते हैं, वे भी लॉगिन करें तुरंत NIOS की वेबसाइट www.nios.ac.in पर।
So before the break, we were talking of the laws of perceptual organization. So we talked of proximity, the law of proximity. Let's talk about other laws. The second one is the law of similarity. Here the stimuli that are similar in size, shape or color tend to be grouped together. So in the picture also you can see that there are 3 rows of blue dots and 3 rows of red dots. So I am not saying now that there are different columns or different rows, but I am classifying the dots on the basis of the color. So basically the objects which are similar or similar in terms of shape, in terms of color or in terms of size also, we tend to classify these objects in the same group. So I am telling here that you might also notice that there are two different groups, and the first one is consisting of the red dots and the second one is of blue dots. Then we talk of continuity. So continuity basically refers to the perception that tends towards simplicity and continuity. So here we are when we are given stimuli. So for example, you can see in the picture also that there are various dotted figure. It is a dotted figure and it is trying to make a figure. For example, you might say that it is a concentric circle. So we tend to perceive objects as a basically it as a complete picture. Not like we will not say that there are so and so number of dots in the picture, rather we will say that it is a concentric circle. So we try to fill in the gaps by ourselves in perception. Next we talk of closure. So let me ask you, what do you see in this picture? Do you see 7 dots or do you see a triangle? So if you see a triangle, basically most people will answer that we see a triangle. So here the law of closure is getting applied. Basically closure refers to the tendency to complete a figure that is incomplete but has a consistent overall form. So you might see that this triangle is not a complete triangle, but you are just by seeing when you are perceiving it to be a triangle. So this is a law which our perception follows, that it will fill in the gaps, or it will complete an incomplete figure in order to give you a holistic picture. Then there is the fifth one is common region. So stimuli that are found within a common area, they tend to be seen as a group. So there are two dots in one circle and there are two dots in another circle. So the two dots in one circle, we will perceive them to be together, and we will see them to be a group, as a part of group. So whereas in the another circle also there are two dots only, and we will perceive that these two dots are forming a part of another circle. So the objects or the stimuli that are in the common area, they are seen to be as a part of a common group. Next we talk of perceptual constancy. So when we talk of perceptual constancy, it is basically a phenomena where the perception of an object's shape, size or brightness, it remains unchanged, and even though its image on the retina has changed, but we are perceiving it to be same. So when we talk of constancy, there are three types of constancy. First is the size constancy, second is the shape constancy, and the third one is the brightness constancy. So if you meet your friend and that friend of yours is standing approximately 100 meters away from you, so the image that of your friend which will be forming on your retina will be smaller in size. But do you think that your friend has gotten reduced to that size? No, you keep on perceiving your friend to be of the same height or the same size, because when you are perceiving that, different things are taken into account. So while we are perceiving certain things, so size constancy is maintained. So if you are perceiving an object bigger in size just because it is closer to you, the image on the retina is forming which is large in size. It doesn't matter whether the image of that object is forming big or small, but you take into account several other factors, like what is the distance of that object from yourself. So size constancy works here. Then there is shape constancy. When you see an object, there are certain things which might appear differently in different shape. For example, if you see this cup, if you see it from an angle, and you might see it to be it might appear to you as a flat object if you see it from a particular angle, but despite it to be appearing as a flat object, you keep on believing that it has a different shape. This is called as shape constancy. Then brightness constancy. For example, if you see an object in bright light, and if you see that object in a dark room or dark environment, the brightness of that object is changing, but you still perceive it to be of the same brightness. This is basically your perception is getting adjusted, because it is taking into account that there are several factors in the environment, like the distance, like the environmental light, like the angle which is being formed with the object. So all these things are considered, and this is one of the key features, which is perceptual constancy, and hence an appropriate or an objective perception is happening. So if this is the same explanation, and so next we talk of depth perception. So depth perception is another important part of perception. It is basically your ability to see three-dimensional space, to accurately judge distances. Depth cues are the feature of environment and the messages from the body that supply information about the distance and space. So have you ever thought how come distance or depth is perceived? How are we able to understand that this is not a 2D world but a 3-dimensional space? How are we able to understand what is the depth of an object, which object is nearer to us, which object is farther away from us? So there are different cues for understanding these. So depth perception is basically, some part of it is innate in us and some part of it we learn through experiences. So there have been experiments which tell you about that even in a 6 months or 6-month-old baby, he or she is able to perceive depth. So in an experiment, they made sure, they performed an experiment on a child, and they could, in the process, they discovered that even a 6-month-old child was able to perceive depth. So what are these cues that help us to understand depth? So the cues which work with just one eye are called as monocular cues, and those which require basically 2 eyes are called as binocular cues. So binocular cues are the most basic source of depth perception that is caused due to retina disparity, a discrepancy in the images that reach the right and left eye. So let us discuss what are these different types of cues. So when we are talking of cues are basically signals for us in order to better understand what is the depth. So there are certain cues which use one eye only, and these are also called as pictorial cues, and there are other cues which use both our eyes. For example, there is a short distance between your left eye and the right eye. So when you see an object, the right eye forms an image, whereas the left eye forms another image. So depending on the gap between these two images, which is called as the retina disparity, so the two images will be formed, and what is the difference in these two images? This calculated information goes into your brain, and then it makes sense of what is the distance of that object from your eye. For example, if an object is placed at a farther away from my eyes, so the image will be formed towards nearer. For example, if an object is kept at a distance and I am seeing that object, so whatever the image will be formed in my right eye and whatever the image will be formed on my left eye will be nearer to each other, because the image will be forming nearer to each other because the object is at a distance from me. But when an object is, suppose it is here, so I am converging my eyes and the image will be formed at a little distance from each other in my left eye and my right eye. So this information of where the image is forming and what is the distance between these two images, this is used by our brain in order to understand what is the depth of that object. So a person with only one eye will have limited depth perception. Next we talk of pictorial depth cues that are used in paintings. So these are the 3 pictures. You might see that in the railway track picture, the second picture, you see the 2 tracks converging. So this is also an information, and but in the real case these lines are never going to converge. These are the 2 parallel lines, but when we see from this point, these seem to be converging. So this is an important cue. This is acting as a cue for us, and we are able to perceive that it is going farther away from us. And these are the cues which are used by artists also in order to create a sense of 3D visualization in their paintings, because paintings happen on a sheet of paper. How you are going to give a sense of depth to it? So these artists use the principles of perception in order to give depth perceptions in the in paintings, in photographs, in any other means. So these were about this was all about what we talk of perception, how perception is occurring, and the basic features like perceptual constancy, depth perception. Now we talk of an important part, which is illusions. So what are illusions? Illusions are basically distorted perceptions of stimuli that exist, whereas hallucination is the perception of objects that have no external reality. So illusions are happening in the presence of stimuli, and whereas hallucinations are different from illusions because there is no external stimuli which is present, but we are still perceiving that object. Examples of illusions could be Muller-Lyer, Ponzo illusion, or horizontal vertical illusion. So let's see. So in the first figure, it shows you about the Muller-Lyer illusion. I'll ask you, which line do you think is longer, the first one or the second one? In the first figure, in the figure A, whether line A is bigger or line B is bigger. So most probably you might think that the second line is longer in comparison to the first one. But when we objectively measure the two lines, which you can do, these are the three illusions I have taken from your book only, and you can measure it from the scale. Both of these lines are of equal length, but in the second one, because the arrows are they are open outwards, we are perceiving it to be lengthier or longer, but in actual sense, what is there? Both of the lines are of equal length. The second one is the Ponzo illusion. So if we tend to, so the horizontal line which is marked, if we draw a similar line ahead, we will, of the similar length, we will perceive it to be of longer length because the lines are converging. So here the two lines, in the two lines, it appears that the second one, it is shorter, whereas the first one is lengthier. The third one is the horizontal vertical illusion. So let me ask you, which line do you think, the horizontal or the vertical, which line do you think is the longer line? If your answer is that the vertical line is the longer, is of longer length, then you can see that the horizontal vertical illusion is working for you. In this case, both the lines are of equal length, but when we talk of the horizontal line and the vertical line, both are of same length. You can measure them also. The vertical line, it tends to appear longer. So these are the three cases, and you can see it for yourself that these illusions are working, and how basically the principle of perception can also lead to some sort of inaccurate perception. Next we talk of attention. So attention is basically selective attention. It is a process in which we give priority to a particular incoming sensory message, and then attention has basically three important functions. One is a sensory filter, and the second one is a response selection, whereas the third one is a gateway to consciousness. There are multiple factors on which attention depends. The first one is the physical factors, like the shape of the stimulus, the size of the stimulus, the brightness, the contrast, and how frequently it is getting repeated. And the second one is motives. It might be anything like, for example, if you are hungry, you might tend to give more attention to the stimuli of food in your environment. Then we have extrasensory perception. So when we talk of extrasensory perception, it is a little controversial topic because some psychologists believe it to be true and others ignore its presence or they don't accept that it exists. So parapsychology is basically a field which tries to study these extrasensory perception, and there are certain phenomena which come under the category of extrasensory perception. For example, precognition, for example, clairvoyance or psychokinesis. So in precognition, what is happening? You are able to perceive the future events. There are certain movies also which show that some people are able to perceive the death or the future events accurately. Another one is psychokinesis, and it basically refers to a person's power over objects. For example, they can exert influence over inanimate objects. For example, they can move inanimate objects in their surroundings just by their mind. So the presence of these extrasensory perception are still very controversial. Not many psychologists accept it. Lastly, we come on to the applications of perception in everyday life. So it has multiple applications. For example, eyewitness memory, in perceptual awareness in positive psychology, and in paying attention around our surroundings. So in terms of eyewitness memory, is basically, it is a known fact that eyewitness memory, it is subject to a lot of errors, and to correctly understand how this eyewitness testimony or eyewitness memory might be laden with errors, it can be through understanding of perception. Perceptual awareness, it is basically understanding what factors contribute to accurate perception. The last one is the value of paying attention. So when we pay attention around, we are basically trying to journalize a lot of things, and we are not paying proper attention to diverse situations. So perception or errors in perception can be helpful in understanding that how attending to stimulus and perceiving them correctly is important, and not only generalizing. So your chapter 5 is complete, and thank you.
ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम में हमें NIOS के थ्रू ये सिखाया जाता है, बताया जाता है कि आपको कौन सी प्रॉब्लम में पेशेंट को कैसे स्टेबलाइज करना है।